Hello everybody. This video aims, even if it has sometimes very technical aspects, to make known and understand what Unicist Homeopathy is. It's the first in a series of 3. The next two, entitled Unicist Homeopathy Does Well and Unicist Homeopathy Second Prescription, are aimed more at therapists empowered to prescribe homeopathic remedies. The latter two are more technical and aim to give clear and precise technical tools to therapists who are curious or who are seeking to recall their memory or to discover deaths that are often unknown in French homeopathy training. Thank you for subscribing to my YouTube channel, JLC Brainstorming. Many themes exciting, if I dare, await you. Regards. Hello, I'm happy to meet you again for this new video, which will in fact be the first video in English of a triptych on Unicist homeopathy. At a time when homeopathic remedies are no longer even covered by Social Security, after decades of lack of understanding of what homeopathy really is by the vast majority of people, and even more so by allopathic doctors and medical doxa in France, who have not stopped denigrating homeopathy by relegating it to the rank of alternative medicine, which implies good woman remedies. Here, I'm going to help you understand what homeopathy really is. It's neither alternative medicine nor good woman's remedies. Moreover, about the latter term, there was from the start confusion. Indeed, good woman's remedy comes from the English term good fame, and which means of good reputation. This sequence of 3 videos will therefore be divided as follows. The first video, Unicist Homeopathy, an Art and a Science, is aimed at all those who are interested in this theme and or who are treated and more often cured by it, as well as all those who have the curiosity and thirst, just like me, to know and understand. In short, this video is made for you. The second video in this triptych is entitled Unicist Homeopathy Dosing Well, focuses more particularly on the doses to be administered. The third, entitled Unicist Homeopathy Making the Right Choice During the Second Prescription, targets a use and a good knowledge of the medical subject for the possible case of a second prescription. These last 2 videos may be of interest anymore who wants to understand the mysteries of Unicist homeopathy, but more specifically because it remains still very technical. Therapists who sometimes prescribe or advise the use of homeopathic remedies. These 3 videos have already been published on my YouTube channel, JLC Brainstorming in French. Where does this knowledge come from? It's very simple. About 30 years ago, I had the chance to participate in Genova in training seminars on Unicist homeopathy every other weekend during a year. At the time, I was living and working in the southeastern part of the country. My research in many fields corresponding to a personal quest for the good, I was when working for the 3rd Maritime Region in armaments research centers. I quit at the age of 33, thinking I could have better things to do, which I did. To begin our study of Unicist Homeopathy, I want to remind you what is required and expected of a therapist and which is written on the front page of the wonderful Organon of Medicine written by Hahnemann and to which I will refer often in all 3 videos. First, the medical vocation. The highest and even the only vocation of the doctor is to restore the health of sick people. This is what we call healing. Its vocation is not to forge so-called systems by combining hollow ideas and hypotheses about the intimate meaning of the process of life and the origin of diseases in the invisible interior at the time of Hahnemann of the organism, and ambition that makes so many doctors waste their strength and their time. Nor does his vocation consist in seeking, through innumerable attempts, to explain morbid phenomena and the next cause of diseases, which has always remained hidden from them, nor is it aimed at those lavished in unintelligible words and in a jumble of vague and pompous expressions who want to appear learned in order to astonish the ignorant while the sick ask in vain for help. We have had enough of these learned musings called theoretical medicine, and for which special chairs have been set up. And it's high time that those who call themselves doctors stop deceiving poor humans by their gallimacias and finally begin to act, that is to say, to really help and heal. The therapeutic ideal is to restore health in a gentle and permanent way, to remove and destroy the disease in its entirety by the shortest, safest, and least harmful route. This is based on clear and intelligible principles. Dear listeners, it's clear that today, with the fantastic advances in medicine, often assisted by technology, I would personally put a damper on these assertions. So, let's start our training with the definition of the word homeopathy. It comes from the Greek homoios, which means similar, and pathos, disease. So, it's a therapeutic method created by the German doctor Hahnemann, 1755-1843, which consists in treating a patient with doses, I should rather say of dynamizations, infinitesimal of substances which would cause in healthy humans disorders similar to those presented by the patient. Opposite, allopathy, term invented by Hahnemann. 2 main currents of teaching. French homeopathy. The investigations are based on the approach of a pathognomonic symptoms of the disease. Here, I start with the medical gallimacias, that is to say, I explain, of a sign that makes it possible to establish a priori the definite diagnosis of a disease because it is characteristic of it and that causes for the therapist the search for drugs that are as close as possible to the symptoms in progress. Second current, Unicist Homeopathy. Investigations are carried out by bringing out the symptoms specific to the patient, the set of symptoms more precisely. In this approach, we will look for the similimum. See Organo, chapters 24 to 34. That is to say, the remedy capable of inducing in healthy humans the symptomatic picture as similar as possible to that of the patient. The search of similimum can be carried out from the medical field, which proves to be very difficult because of the multitude of existing symptoms. The limits of our memory prevent us from disposing of all the richness of the medical material, what is called medical matter. Homeopaths have noted the appearance of any symptom affecting the different spheres of expression of man, from the most external to the innermost, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. They thus created the medical material, identified the symptoms that appeared experimentally when an artificial disease is induced by not the material as such, but by the forces contained in it and released by the time of preparation. This is the reason why we resort to the use of the repertoire of Kent, 1849-1916, and the repertoire by Bartol Klumber. Their handling, which requires perseverance, will, and insight, makes it possible to have an unparalleled work tool. The therapist must endeavor, through hard work, to discover the characteristics, symptoms of the patient. But this approach implies, beforehand, a thorough knowledge of the basic principles of homeopathic medicine. I refer once again to the Organo in chapters 1 to 4, Therapeutic Ideal, chapters 9 to 16, Dynamism of the Vital Principle. Disease is not a separate entity from the whole organism. The disease doesn't exist, there is a sick person. The totality of the symptoms that express the reaction of the organism constitute the true disease, chapters 17 to 19 and 71. The therapeutic must aim to stop the morbid discordance of the vital principle, the conjunction of the symptoms of the circumstances observed in each individual case is the only indication that can guide the search for the remedy. Homeopathic medicine must be based not only on technical knowledge of a medical subject, but above all on essential doctrinal concepts. It's necessary to integrate the mind before dissecting the matter, otherwise embarking on a therapeutic approach emptied of its most absolute meaning and in-depth knowledge of the medical subject, allowing the remedy to be integrated as an entity in its own right. A life force lives. It's neutral, but can be constructive or destructive, depending on the use that is made of it. Life potentials, the patient and the remedy must match, under penalty of degradation. First, you have to integrate what is essential in him. That is to say, what is called his genus. So, from what is general to go to the particular and learn to grasp, understand, and integrate the prioritization of symptoms, Organon, chapters 151 and 152. Search for symptoms. Chapters 153 and 154, Value of Symptoms. Let us now begin our presentation with an introduction. Comments on Chapter 1 of Organon explain clearly the differences between an allopathic or homeopathic approach. The fundamental difference being that in the first case, the symptom is not integrated into the disease, and attempt is made to cut it off from the patient. The symptom may reappear later or even in a completely different form. Obviously, given the intuitive and inspired level of homeopathic art and science, it would seem that there is a God for his practitioners. On the homeopathic approach, medicine of the soul, we start from everything that is objective, material, very concrete remarks of a state, to go back to the subjective, the immaterial. You have to connect the facts to their cause. Let us note three levels of the disease: symptomatic, functional, or even lesional. Any objective symptom is the support of a disorder of vital energy, which can manifest itself on four levels, ranging from the most external to the innermost: physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. The vital principle cannot be modified. It's our purpose, our reason for being, expression of oneself in a dimension that is not perceptible to us. Its support is a vital energy that is projected into all energies, which are multiple manifestations of the central energy. Hence the equality X equals H over mv. That follows is a bit technical and will consist in explaining to you what this equality means. It's very important to understand that. It's de Broglie's theory of the electron. The interpretation of optical phenomena implies an undulatory and corpuscular nature of light. On the one hand, monochromatic radiation propagates like a wave characterized by a wavelength x. On the other hand, it consists of particles or photons carrying a quantum of energy, hv. By analogy with the quantum theory of radiation, de Broglie suggested in 1924 that the electron, and more generally any material particle, had both corpuscular and undulatory properties. He therefore associated with a moving particle characterized by a mass m and at a speed v, a wave of length x, such that x equals h over mv. H being the so-called Planck constant, it's equal to 6.623 10 power minus 34 joules second. Let us also recall that quantum theory associates moreover a radiation of frequencies v equal to c divided by x and energy E equal to hv. Numerous experiments have confirmed the ideas of de Broglie. in particular that of Davidson and Germer in 1927, showing that an electron beam striking a metal plate is diffracted exactly as a light wave is. So, you could attribute certain wave properties to particles. From these ideas, and thanks to the work of Schrödinger and Heisenberg, a new mechanic was born, wave mechanics, one of the first fundamental principles of which is the principle of uncertainty, enunciated by Heisenberg in 1927, according to which it's impossible to know both precisely the position of an electron and its speed, or, if you prefer, its momentum p equal to mv. It's known that it's possible to determine in a precise manner the position of an object with an accuracy of the order of magnitude of the wavelength of the radiation used to see the object. In the case of the electron, it would therefore be necessary to use radiation of every short wavelength and therefore of great energies, the action of which would modify the momentum and consequently the energy E equal to a half of mv square of the electron. Forgive me for the length of this explanation, which required a certain amount of energy, by the way, and the technical side, but by meditating on the formula in the context of life 1, we would find that Einstein and Buddha were on the same wavelength with, however, for Buddha, a few photons ahead, probably. Thus, and to close this explanation, science demonstrates today that for the same experiment at the energetic level of matter, two different experimenters will obtain different results on the trajectory of particles, support of these energies. This is why today particles are trapped in ion traps called Penning traps, 1894-1953. This system having won the Nobel Prize in Physics to Hans Demet and Wolfgang Paul in 1989. All in all, we perceive here all the responsibility of the homeopath, physician of energies, and of the absolute qualities to which he must rise to master his art. But let us come back to our subject. A state of health would be the absence of physical symptoms, the control of one's own emotions, a detachment from one's own person, that is, without egocentrism, a state held in permanent failure by our fundamental psora. Miasmatic terrain can be in hypophenomenon, hyperphenomenon, or neutral. At the end of any interrogation, we will have to ask ourselves the triple question as to purpose of our intervention. Is it useful, necessary, essential? Definition of symptoms. 1. General action. Localize well the action of the remedy in time and space. That is to say, its particular centers of activity, organs, tissues, etc. Its different phases of activity, excitement, and depression. 2. The type. General rule. French homeopathy attaches particular importance to the typology, which, however, remains relative because insufficient. It's a question of perceiving all the symptoms. 3. Singular, peculiar, rare symptoms. Extremely important as they provide the keys to a correct understanding of the case. Example: improvement of a dental rage by the rocking of the child. 4. Etiological symptoms. What causes originally generated the miasmatic pathological picture? Hereditary factors, acquired, fear, indignation, that is to say, any cause related to the psycho-emotional domain, shock, any cause related to the physical domain. 5. Psycho-emotional symptoms. See the section on prioritizing symptoms. 6. General symptoms. Periodicity, alternation, improvement, worsening, external influences, day-night cycle, temperature, season, movement, positions. See general symptoms. Internal influence in relation to functions capable of modifying symptoms. Example: crying, drinking, eating, urinating, defecating. Food, Kant, 1362 to 1364, plus aversion and desire. Food, Kant, 480 and 484. Dream in Kant, sleep, page 1237. Sexual symptoms, secretions and excretions, laterality, sorrow, pain plus sensation, Ken, 1377. 7. Regional symptoms. From top to bottom. General rule. If the general symptom is strong, it can prevail over a weak mental symptom. So, from there, we have to look at the degree of the remedies. Sort the symptoms identified during the interrogation. Retain only the symptoms of important values. Retain at most 3 key symptoms. See Herring's tripod and refer to the inventory technique. So, there are 3 degrees in the Kant repertoire. Third degree, in bold, 75%, means that a large number of experimenters have manifested it. Symptoms of certain value, confirmed by re-experimentation, verified physically. Second degree, italics, 45%, means that some experimenters have manifested it, confirmed during re-experimentation, verified clinically during healing. First degree, normal type face, 15%, means that it was verified during clinical treatments but not tested during a proving, nor reconfirmed. Let us come to the important prioritization of symptoms. 1. Manifest etiology, previous condition of origin which initiated the disease process, referring to the occasional cause in chapter of the first prescription. It can also be a revealing factor that needs to be resolved before perfecting the miasmatics to die, that is to say, of the terrain of the subject. 2. Mental symptoms. Narration of a day of life, love or hate, to ask last, after the establishment of a climate of trust, fear, intelligence, illusion, delirium, memory, general rule, will, mind, to live, these indispositions to enjoy pleasure of power love, of power, rational fear in making plans, moral love of moral feeling, rational or emotional symptoms. signature of the patient's vital state. These are the most important because they express more precisely the vital modalities of the patient. 3. Strange rare symptoms singular. Refer to Organon chapter 153. The symptoms must correspond to the modalities of expression of the general symptoms. These first 3 points must be clear, precise, indisputable, otherwise the general symptoms prevail. 4. General symptoms. All the things that are in intimate relationship with the patient, with his personal life, with his vital force, belong to the being as a whole. They are related to the personality and described by the patient by saying I. Symptoms of improvement, aggravation, movement, before, during, after menstruation, consolation, anger, air, sea, position, hot, cold, plane, altitude, season, lunar, laterality, periodicity, tendency to bleed, to cool, warm room, climate, sun, wind, thunderstorms, frost, fog, snow, rain, humidity. 5. Desire, aversion and food intolerances. Refer to food in 15. You will need to understand well what their general, local, or digestive repercussions are. 6. Sleep, dreams. During sleep, the patient can reveal himself as he is, without interference from the mind. 7. Sex, sexual behavior, menstrual disorders, perversion, a certain love of God, masturbation. As a general rule, women are often more sincere than men. From the 8th point and until the 11th, these symptoms will only be important in the context of a confirmation of the simillimum. They can represent an elimination in progress, prohibition to eliminate it, or are peripheral, that is to say that the therapist must consider them to avoid pushing back a pathology from the outside to the center. Developments contrary to Hering's law. 8. Flow, excretions, secretions, perspiration. 9. Regional symptoms, from top to bottom and from center to periphery. 10. Pathognomonic symptoms, which are characteristic of the disease and which are expected to be found in the patient. 11. Previous symptoms, which had disappeared and come back. Do not change the collection. General rule 8 to 11. Do not start with these points. 12. Crying and perpetual tensions, activism. That is to say, overactivity. This state of compensation by excess cannot exceed certain potential thresholds, that is to say, the specific reaction capacity. Syphilis, nature, in its law of economy, sees that I risk spending my original energy capital by an excess, will divert this compensation towards another dimension of ourselves, another field, the syphilitic terrain, inner vibratory behavior induced during the use of mercury in case of syphilis, corresponding then a state of violence, destruction. It's therefore not necessarily a state in contradiction with the vital rules. The therapist must simply understand the process in order to be able to regularize the whole, otherwise he will leave the individual in the spontaneous state of a manifestation of certain laws that risk leading him to a state of degradation such that he is threatened with disappearance, as is the case for many of us during degenerative pathologies, aggressive pathologies such as cancer, or mental pathologies such as depression or ulcers. Let us recall the hierarchy of symptoms from the most important to the least important: mental, emotional, dreams, concentration, feeling, physical. We have a vital form that inhibits us, balances everything, and then, when it's out of order, sets in motion the reality of a process of self-healing manifested by the existence of a spontaneous and natural healing force called Vix Medicatrix. When this voice medicatrix initiates the process of action, tending to correct this original vibratory disorder, what is called the fundamental psora, which has touched my vital energy, it can generate three types of reactions. Adynamia, which corresponds to an inability to be yourself. Excess, psychotic state. Violence, syphilitic condition. In short, any pathology from the common cold to the most dangerous cancer is the result of a disruption of this vital energy, the latter being related to precise parameters imposed at the beginning and defined by an amplitude, a wavelength, a particular frequency corresponding to what I have to accomplish in my life. Three laws of healing according to Ehring. A patient always heals from top to bottom. Any pathology that cures in this direction will give rise to downward pathologies. Example: we can treat a migraine patient who will then present an asthmatic state, which may be a state of young age that had disappeared and which had slowly given way to a migraine condition. It shows who you are and that you are on the right path to recovery and that the treatment is well conducted. We can notice here the verification of a cellular memory. Everything is inscribed in man because a cure always takes place in the opposite direction of the appearance of the symptoms. So we can recall old symptoms and from the inside out. We reinforce a natural spontaneous tendency, the Vix Medicatrix, but be careful. Two directions must be observed to be assured of the common sense of healing. Example: suppose you have a stomach ulcer. I treat the ulcerative man and see the ulcer disappear successfully, but with the onset of chronic bronchitis. Now I'm going the other way around because I'm raising the pathology. I can deduce that the treatment is poorly conducted and therefore I have to correct. If, on the contrary, the ulcer heals with a possible appearance of major hemorrhoidal attack, I can be convinced of a good healing path. Indeed, we pass from an internal lesion to an external lesion and, moreover, from top to bottom. If, moreover, the hemorrhoidal crisis had been experienced in the past by the patient years before, I'm in the logic of the natural healing thought. The three symptoms that radiate the story of the individual This will allow to describe the psychic tripod. For this, it is essential to prioritize the symptoms and value them. The real symptoms are usually hidden behind false symptoms. The symptoms, let us remember, are the set of geophysical spatio-temporal reaction modalities of the individual. A symptom is a sign of a revealed condition. The question then arises as to how the therapist can intervene on a vital energy which is virtual and not material. This cannot be done with weightable materials, drugs, that is to say, conventional drugs which are material, with a weightable, measurable dose, but rather with remedies. Matter is no longer used in its macroscopic external dimension according to the properties inherent in what it is in its physical appearance, that is to say, its classical physico-chemical properties, but this time following well-known techniques to release the forces contained in it. The remedy is therefore a substance drawn from three types: mineral, vegetable, or animal, in infinitesimal solutions, that is to say, diluted by a method of increasing dilution. We will take one part at the start. We will dilute it in 99 parts of a solvent. Then, at this first dilution, we will give 200 successive shocks. This is the time of dynamization. Then, from the first dilution, one drop will be taken and poured into 99 new parts of a solvent. Example, 30 degrees alcohol, and we are going to give 200 violent shocks to the solution, then reproduce this operation once, twice, 3 times, 100,000 times. It's experimental and reproductive an incalculable number of times. We then release a fourth potential that was intrinsically contained in matter and that was not revealed because the matter was not energized. We can verify these laws with the help of experiments called proving. What was done by the first homeopaths? They took healthy subjects because at the time there were still some, that is to say, people who were not sick. They prepared infinitesimal dilutions, for example, arsenic in dilutions 1/100th exploding to 100, that is to say, not materially constituted arsenic, which would kill a horse, but arsenic whose liberative forces will be able to be used and which were unsuspected in the state of matter because it was included in a molecular and atomic game that prevented these forces from being released. We are going to release vital forces from arsenic. A dose of this arsenic is therefore made to absorb a dose of this arsenic to a series of healthy subjects, that is to say, free of any symptoms. Most subjects will develop, according to their sensitivity, by a resonance phenomenon, a certain number of symptoms at the physical level or that of emotions, avarice, fear of the dark, or laughter, aggressiveness and suicidal tendencies, skin symptoms, dry eczema. It will then be possible to cure a sick subject by making him absorb a remedy equivalent to and corresponding to the natural disease, to see the latter disappear. Then, in the second step, see the artificial disease disappear as well. There is a genuine healing phenomenon because the homeopathic remedy will act directly on the vital energy level. It is said that homeopathy is a science and an art. It is an art because the homeopath must feel, judge, at the level of dilution and dynamization that will correspond to the level of natural disease. No one is sick in the same way. For example, for the same stomach ulcer, some patient will be sensitive to a remedy from the mineral type, others from the plant type, others still from the animal type. Dilution depending on the sensitivity of the person. Low dilution for the physical, medium dilution for the mental and emotional, high dilution for the psychic. Pathologies, in fact, result from a poor integration of this resonance of each human being with a set of life forms that exist on Earth. We forget that we humans are in constant contact with them. Otherwise, how can you explain that the homeopathic remedy can cure us of a host of problems that overwhelm us? There is a close correspondence between every human being and a set of elements in the life of the three types. This amounts to saying that each one of us is bound in the universe to a certain number of different types or forms of life, and the purpose of man lies precisely in his ability to synthesize these forms of life, not by himself, but through him. The way in which man has cut himself off from life can manifest itself according to the three tendencies explained above, namely psora, psychosis, or syphilis. The violence observed is only a consequence of a non-integration of each man and of the collective in relation to a mission, a responsibility that he has towards all types. Homeopathy is therefore aimed at the man integrated into a collective. As long as man is ill, we can still say that he has a chance of healing, since nature then gives us the means to correct our inner state in order to regain our capacity for synthesis. The homeopath remains neutral and sure of himself, never letting it seem that you do not know, prescribing placebos, reminorizing agents. You save time and avoid mistakes. The patient always comes to seek moral help. A doctor sometimes heals, often relieves, always comforts. So, the action is at the level of education of the patient in life sciences, advises, comforts, revealing the patient's potentials, care of the patient himself and not an assistantship, cleaning off some dams. Example, Nux vomica 200 ch or 200 k. Kent used to use one and the same bottle. This is the difference between Hahnemannian hundredth and K. Talamonol in 200 in the morning, 1000 at noon, 10,000 in the evening at bedtime, etc. Key point of the interview: position of the therapist, neutrality, quality of listening and of heart, ability to keep secrecy, sense of respect. In case of prescription, mastery of the subject, certainty that the final phase, the physical support of metachemical and alchemical work, responsibility for patient follow-up. Any process started must be completed. General notes. 1. You should never prescribe on external symptoms. 2. The occasional cause is preponderant. 3. The answers to the interview must not be able to be yes or no. They must allow the patient to invest in his answer. 4. The will and understanding of man places his miasmatic level. 5. Never remember fuzzy symptoms. You have to be clear, precise, indisputable, or change the question. Standard consultation chain. 1. Reason for consultation. Current major pathologies, possible initial diagnosis. 2. Identification of the patient. Name, address, possible code, telephone, date of birth, sex, professional activity, physical, family and marital status, confession. 3. Detailed family anamnesis, ascendants, descendants, collaterals, list of pathologies to suggest. 4. Personal anamnesis. Timeline. Interests. A. Classical allopathic value, indicating important or personal pathologies. B. Interest in pediatrics, pathologies of identical parents in children. C. Miasmatic understanding of the patient in his family context. 5. Introductory comments of the therapist. I am here commenting to the patient on the different aspects of the homeopathic approach by explaining to him that the current or local expression, acute or chronic, reflects the talent potentiality of his terrain, whose reactive modalities are expressed, among other things, by the 9 characters of each symptom, creating a climate of trust. 6. Spontaneous anamnesis. At this moment, we have patients to get to know him and to spontaneously tell us everything that characterizes him. We write 1 line per symptom. We refer to Organo, chapter 84. The patient tells the story of the development of his suffering. The members of his family or the people around him tell us what he complained, how he behaved, and everything they noticed about him. The therapist looks, listens, observes, with all his senses, what is changed and extraordinary about the patient. He writes everything on paper, exactly in the terms that the patient and his relatives have used as much as possible. He lets them finish their story without interrupting them, unless they stray into useless digressions. He was only careful at the beginning to urge them to speak slowly so as to be able to follow in writing what he deems necessary to note. Note, it must be borne in mind that any interruption disturbs the rest of the ideas of the speaker, and things do not come back to his memory as he first wanted to say them. 7. Control of each of the points of the spontaneous anamnesis according to the 9 characters of the symptoms. 8. To relaunch the spontaneous anamnesis, it may be useful to have the patient tell the story of one of his days, his bedtime and his night, to have him talk about his work, his interest in it, relations with his superiors, his subordinates, and his colleagues, the family situation in which he finds himself, who lives with him and in which report. Make him talk about his hobbies and how he uses them. What is his physical, climatic, emotional, and religious environment? What are his aspirations and projects means implemented to achieve them? His successes and failures, the obstacles encountered. Note, at this level, some patients will be able to become aware and possibly say why they are sick and what prevents them from healing themselves. 9. Systematic interrogation. Following Kent's repertoire, starting with vertigo up to generalities, ending with the mind and the genital. Note, Hahnemann and Kent remind us that our questions should be as indirect as possible, giving the patient no opportunity to answer yes or no, or having to choose between two alternatives. 10. Notes of observations. Collected in the previous point 6. Take them one by one. 11. Physical and clinical examinations. 12. Laboratory examinations, radiography, and various tests. 13. Diagnostic hypotheses, indicating possible emergency criteria. Note, at this stage, we must be sure that we have collected all the possible symptoms, otherwise we move on to points 22 and 23 to prescribe placebo, possibly accompanied by lifestyle or food instructions to postpone to a later consultation a more detailed anamnesis and examination. 14. Scheme of previous and current evolution, synoptic chronological summary. Importance of the prescription of placebo during the first consultation, so as to make the departure between the 4 therapeutic actions that can follow a consultation, better understanding and awareness by the patient of his biopathology, the sympathy of the therapist, sympathy, received by the patient. The therapist prescribes himself the possible correction of the lifestyle, food hygiene, or the environment, then the remedy. 15. Reflection on what to cure in the patient. Organo, chapter 3. Lo que este digno de curar en el paciente, as Ortega liked to say. 16. Organo, chapter 153. Search for symptoms validly representative of the patient's personal reaction modalities, excluding common or banal symptoms and those that are allopathical, speaking of the disease. Minimal value syndrome maximum. 3 groups of symptoms. In general, preferably level 3. I refer you to the degrees of the remedies. 17. Prioritizing of symptoms among those chosen in the previous point. 18. Identification of hierarchical symptoms and identification of remedies that are at the top of the list. 19. Checks by medical materials. Remedies appeared in point 18, and possible differential diagnosis with remedies suggested during the consultation and which were noted in a white space. 20. evaluations of the patient energy level to estimate the dynamization to which he is probably sensitive. See Organo, page 51. Synthesis, synchronization. 21. 6 points should be examined here. First point, acute or chronic nature of the patient's pathological condition. I refer you to the Organo in chapters 140 to 148 or to the Cannes Conference 31. Second point, partiality or totality of the symptomatology collected and on which we decide to act. Third point, curative or palliative intentions of the therapy we want to establish. Fourth point, action with central or peripheral aim to therapy according to the lesional or functional nature of the complaints. Fifth point, does the remedy cover clinical diagnosis? Sixth point, adaptation of the dynamization to the curative or palliative intention and or possible dangers of the remedy to be identified in synthetic medical materials. 22. Decision of the possible remedy and the desirable dynamization, suppression, maintenance or decrease of the previous therapy. 23. 3 questions to ask yourself then. Is it useful and necessary? Is it essential and benevolent according to the context of the patient? 24. Administration or possible prescription of the remedy at the chosen dynamization or of a placebo, saccharum, lactis. List of cases. These are obvious cases without the need for an anamnesis likely to save you time and produce miracles. All you have to do is open a medical subject and check its appropriateness. You are the sole judge. Duodenal atresia in infants. Remedy that can avoid surgery. Nux vomica 10,000 ch. To be taken by the baby in the evening. Conditions due to cold shock, hot and cold, bath, drink, bellis perennis. Electrical discharge, phosphorus. Removing a permanent probe, Staphysagria 1000 K or Ch. Premature birth, Arnica 200 Ch. Anesthesia dam, Talamonol morning 200 Ch, noon 1000 Ch, evening 10,000 Ch. I can tell you that I experienced it myself, and in the minutes that followed, I made a very big dark yellow pee and smelled of the anesthetic product. Injuries or infections that do not heal. Gunpowder-free X. This is a trituration. Stutters. Stramonium. Toothache with green stools. Camomilla. With yellow stools. Podophyllum. Stomach cancer. Ornithogalum. 1 drop once a month. It should be noted that today it's perfectly accepted to use homeopathy as a supplement to conventional treatments, which is still a great step forward. Alcohol barrier, ethyl alcohol 10,000 Ch. General cleaning, Nux vomica 200 Ch plus remineralizing powder. Acute reaction to the sun. Allergies, rash on the back of the hands. Muriaticum acidum 6 Ch, 6 pellets 3 times a day. Crush of the finger. Hypericum 10,000 ch, 1 dose. Ingrown toenail, Magnetis polus australis, 1 dose. Water polluted by bacilli, Pyrogenium, 30 ch, 5 granules every morning as a preventive, several tubes. I can tell you that I also experienced it a few weeks before leaving for Egypt, and I was one of the few who didn't have a problem with water. Pain following a fracture, Calcarea phosphorica, 10,000 ch, 2 pellets 3 times a day. Saving an eye, following trauma, for example by playing tennis. Symphytum, 200 ch, 1 dose. Meninges problem, Nitricum acidum, 6 ch. Abscess, Silicea, 6 ch, 2 granules 3 times a day, plus calendula, mother tincture that cleans the wound. Tonsillitis, Lachesis, D12. Teeth loosening and even any periodontosis in saddle, 8 spoonfuls per day for 1 to 2 months. To fight lice, Psorinum, 200 ch, 1 dose, and a few days later, Pediculus capitis, 200 ch, 1 dose, plus a few drops of lavender essential oil in the hair leather. Food poisoning, Pyrogenium, 1000 K. Not being qualified to prescribe because I'm not a therapist, I have been able to test some of these remedies on myself in the cases specified, and they have proven to be extremely functional. I am now going to tell you about my doctrinal year, dear friends. You have understood that I studied with strength and passion the doctrine of Unicist Homeopathy, medical subjects, as well as Directory of Kent, of which I had bought at the time in India a version in English. It is this summary that I wrote then and that I chose to reveal to you today. Homeopathy is decried by ignorant who did not bother to understand it. Homeopathy has not ceased to receive blows, both by allopaths and by governments relayed at leisure by the media. It has always been derided, sometimes understood as quackery or as remedies from the time of the witches. Through this study, we realize what an art and a science it is. I was able to witness real anamnesis that in some cases could last more than 3 hours. The problem with doxa is that Unicist homeopathy works, and in my eyes it can only be put into the hands of an elite, not from intelligentsia, but sincere, possessing a high spiritual level and ready to move on from many hours to truly heal, because Unicist homeopathy is able to heal. It does not put the light under the bushel, but it highlights the simillimum of the patient with the remedy. It introduces a virtual disease in the patient at the perfect level of the disorder of his vital energy. The symptoms of this disorder disappear suddenly, and the disease induced in perfect harmony with the spiritual dimension of the patient disappears in turn. This is how homeopathy works. Unicist homeopathy works and obtains, when it's carried out according to the protocols I have presented to you, remarkable results, because it's not by abruptly and systematically removing the symptoms that you can really cure a patient who has, according to his initial vital energy, a program, a mission of what he has to do during his earthly life. To finish this presentation, I will probably surprise you again by telling you an experience that happened to me during my study of homeopathy several decades ago. One day, I was traveling by car with a friend, and following an exchange, I had abruptly confided to her that she reminded me, at that very moment, of Cactus grandiflora. She was, in a first, very surprised, then seemed angry, only to finally ask me what that meant. I replied that it had the major characteristics of the genus of this remedy, and that thus the image of a cactus had manifested itself in my mind, a living cactus with long and sharp thorns, ready to function. It was, in fact, called to the extremities since the beginning of the trip. We were returning from Genova. She could not warm up despite a valid onboard heating, and yet her face was purple. Her eyes were tense and congested, a taciturn attitude, even exasperated, difficult to speak, the voice being hoarsened, as if having a lump in her throat. We were 5 friends in all in my car. To relax our young friend, I told her, in all simplicity and sincerity, but with a touch of humor, that exasperated her even more, that I saw her as a big cactus, full of prickles and waterlogged. So I asked her if she wasn't holding water, but for a laugh. I really didn't take myself seriously. To my great astonishment, she confirmed the totality of the similarities and admitted to me having, for a long time, a full bladder and acute pains in the lower abdomen, and that all this put her in a state of dull anger and difficult to contain. Finally, after she had been able to relieve her bladder as a matter of urgency, I explained to her that, as a result of our work over the last 48 hours, she must have been very shaken, which was, all in all, normal and felt, more vividly, her fundamental psoria. It was a good opportunity to answer, at best, all his questions about homeopathy in general and about a spiritual approach in particular. Of course, I did not have Cactus grandiflora in my briefcase. Moreover, I am careful not to prescribe, not being a doctor. I just advise and then refer to a perfectly trained therapist. But after reflection, I wonder today how I was able to converse with a Cactus grandiflora in a car, if not perhaps by becoming a Cactus grandiflora myself. Because throughout this exchange with this troubled friend, I could feel her spirit calm down and then disappear the main symptoms, both physical and mental. So, know that this exchange allowed a shy friend to integrate with more energy and determination into a purely spiritual quest. I had the chance to study Cactus grandiflora in the medical field of Kent, so I was looking forward to getting to know a lot of other remedies better. So I was only surrounded by Ignatia, Naja, Tuia, or Zincum, Arsenicum, and sometimes Aurum. To conclude, I must admit to you frankly that afterwards, by asking the right questions to people, anamnesis, I came to consider that it was no longer after the similimum discovered, and therefore in the logical phase of prescription, useful to prescribe. So much Speak is providing with an unimaginable curative care. A few years later, I felt the need to work on what is called the voice of honey, working more particularly on each letter of the alphabet, giving a specific resonance to each of them. It was very useful to me a few years later when I embraced a teaching career. That's it. I hope that this video was able to give you information that will be useful in your daily life, even if I apologize, it's still very technical. So I remind you that this video is the first of a triptych whose main objective is to make people understand what Unicist Homeopathy is. The following two, addressed to therapists, are respectively entitled Unicist Homeopathy Well Dosed and Unicist Homeopathy Second Prescription. I wish you a path and a quest for the true and the good. My online talks and conferences are completely free and in the public domain. Take advantage of them and take care to share, in turn, this knowledge by publicizing my YouTube channel, GLC Brainstorming. Thank you for your attention and see you soon. Thank you.